The footage begins with a hum, the sound of a drone's propeller slicing through alpine air. Below, a spine of white rock splits a valley of mist and evergreens. Then, at the 3-minute mark, the camera tilts and catches something that shouldn't be there. A line of orange fabric, half buried beneath 40 years of snowmelt. Tents, 3 of them, folded inward like collapsed lungs. Ranger Elena Price paused the playback. "Run it again," she said. Her partner rewound the clip, freezing on the frame where the drone's shadow passed over a ridgeline. In the distance, you could see the faint outline of a trail long removed from official maps, a thin gray scar winding toward a glacier's edge. No modern hiker would ever have reason to be there. Coordinates confirmed. Cut Bank Pass, Glacier National Park, elevation 8,300 feet. A forgotten route, abandoned after the storms of 1981. Summer 1981 was unusually hot across Montana's northern range. The park saw record visitors, gasoline was cheap again, and adventure magazines were printing glossy spreads of America's Untamed Crown. 4 friends from Spokane answered the call. Mark Hanley, 24, civil engineering student; Beth Calloway, 22, nurse in training; Ty Rutherford, 25, amateur photographer; and Joe Carver, 23, seasonal park worker who knew the backcountry by heart. They signed the trail log at Two Medicine Ranger Station on August 3, 1981, noting 3-night loop via Cut Bank, Cross St. Mary. Weather clear, spirits high. Mark's father later told reporters his son had mailed a postcard the morning they left. "See you next week. One more adventure before real life starts." They never came back. According to the ranger log, they were expected out by August 7th. When they missed checkout, staff assumed a delay. Summer storms often forced hikers to wait it out. By August 9th, a forest pilot spotted what looked like a makeshift signal fire near Medicine Grizzly Lake. But wind shear forced him to turn back. No follow-up flight was scheduled. On August 11th, families arrived in person. The official search began the next morning. 17 rangers, 2 tracking dogs, and a helicopter launched from St. Mary Airstrip. Visibility poor, sudden snow squalls at elevation despite August heat. Searchers found fresh boot prints at Cut Bank Camp No. 3, leading north, opposite of their intended loop. One tent stake lay bent, suggesting the group broke camp fast. Ranger Collins noted in his report, "Possible avalanche echo, 0500 hours. Camp left hastily. Direction suggests retreat toward High Basin." No further evidence that day. Day 2. Snowmelt triggered rockfalls. Teams pushed toward Triple Divide Peak, the meeting point of 3 continental watersheds. Nothing. Day 3. Helicopter crew spotted an orange pack cover near a crevasse, but couldn't land safely. Day 4. Weather closed in. Funding and manpower dwindled. By August 15, operations were suspended. Official declaration: lost due to exposure following storm. Beth's parents refused to accept it. They returned every summer, placing flowers at the trail, hoping thaw might reveal something new. It never did. Through the 1980s and 90s, hikers occasionally reported bits of nylon or rusted cookware in the area, but the terrain shifted yearly. Avalanches buried, rivers rerouted. Local legend called it the Vanishing Pass. Guides warned that compasses misbehaved there. Iron in the stone, they said. In 2001, a wildfire swept across the ridge. Satellite imagery showed a white scar where the forest had been, but still no trace of tents or bodies. By 2010, the case file was 3 inches thick, all theories and no proof. Glacier's archives listed it as case number 8147, Hanley Group, missing. In 2023, technology changed the story. Rangers began using drones to monitor ice retreat. A volunteer program invited civilians to scan footage for environmental data, tree line movement. Meltwater mapping. One user, a retired geologist named Cal Dorsey, was reviewing footage from July 19, 2023, when he saw it. 3 orange triangles aligned too perfectly to be natural. He tagged it possible human campsite, timestamp 0714, and sent it to the park's digital portal. 2 weeks later, Elena Price received the notification. By late August 2023, a small expedition formed. Elena Price, mountain guide Noah Red, forensic archaeologist Dr. Leah Mendez, and 2 volunteer rangers. They hiked in before dawn, carrying thermal drones and ground-penetrating radar, standard issue for post-fire surveys, now repurposed for a 42-year-old mystery. As the sun broke over the ridge, they reached the coordinates. The ground was uneven, mottled with melt pools, and there it was, a shred of orange fabric fluttering beneath a thin crust of ice. Leah knelt. Nylon, 1970s manufacture, Type 2 mountain tent. Elena exhaled. So they made it this far. The group marked the perimeter and began a careful, grid search. Within an hour, they uncovered a rusted cooking pot, a film canister, and something that silenced everyone. A leather-bound notebook, initials MH. Its pages were fused by moisture, but under sunlight, they could still make out handwriting. Thin, deliberate, fading into blue smears. August 6th, storm rolling fast. Beth thinks we should turn. Ty says we can beat it. Joe's radio failing, static like waves. If we don't make St. Mary by morning, try for Ridge Light. Elena looked up toward the glacier. The light there was harsh, almost metallic, reflecting off decades of snow compressed into history. They were alive that morning, she whispered. The team camped on site as night descended, the first humans to sleep there since 1981. In the distance, thunder rolled again, echoing through the basin like an old memory. Elena closed the notebook, tucked it into a waterproof case, and said what everyone felt. Tomorrow we start digging. If the mountain kept them, it's time to ask why. Dawn came thin and colorless, the kind of light that seemed filtered through memory. The team had barely slept. Wind dragged at the tent slabs all night, carrying the creaks and sighs of shifting ice. When they stepped outside, frost rimmed their boots. The ridge above them looked different now, less like a place and more like a secret, finally ready to be spoken. Elena Price unzipped the evidence bag and removed the notebook again. The paper was stiff, but in the cold air, faint pencil marks had become visible on one of the back pages. Leah angled her phone flashlight. A single sentence appeared. We heard planes. Then below it, something almost erased. 2 high flares left. Leah exhaled slowly. They were signaling, she said, and no one saw. The team set up the ground-penetrating radar, dragging the device across the patch of earth just beyond the old tent frames. The screen flickered with gray bands, then a dark oval, depth about 1.3 meters. Leah knelt, brushing snow with gloved fingers. We've got an anomaly, soft soil under compact ice. They began to dig. The first layer was crusted ice mixed with shale, each strike of the shovel echoing like a heartbeat. 2 hours later, Noah's spade hit something hollow. He cleared the surface carefully. A metal frame emerged, curved, corroded, unmistakable. It's a pack, he said. They began to dig. The first layer was crusted ice mixed with shale, each strike of the shovel echoing like a heartbeat. 2 hours later, Noah's spade hit something hollow. He cleared the surface carefully. A metal frame emerged, curved, corroded, unmistakable. It's a pack, he said. Inside were fragments of fabric, a rusted spoon, and a camera, an old Pentax, lens cracked but film compartment intact. Elena's hands shook as she passed it to Leah. If there's film in here, even partial, that's 40 years of answers. They sealed it immediately for lab processing. Beside it lay a small enamel mug, etched with letters, BC. Beth Calloway's initials. It was enough to confirm they were at the right site. By midday, the wind had risen. The temperature dropped suddenly, as if the mountain was reclaiming its silence. Leah stood, looking toward the upper ledge. If this was their base camp, where's the exit route? They must have tried to move downslope. Elena scanned the ridge. Let's run a secondary drone sweep, thermal mode. Noah launched the drone, its hum blending with the wind. The monitor displayed a patchwork of white and gray, until suddenly a faint warmth appeared, a pocket under ice. At first, it looked geological, but the shape was too clean, a semicircle of air sealed beneath layers of melt and refreeze. They hiked toward it, roped for safety. The ice underfoot was slick and hollow-sounding. Near a boulder, the size of a small cabin, they found what had caused the signal. A cavity, about 2 feet deep, shielded by ice and rock. Leah aimed her light inside and froze. A wool hat, still bright red beneath the frost, lay pressed against the inner wall. Nearby, a skeletal outline of canvas straps. They didn't touch it. Protocol demanded that identification teams handle potential human evidence. Elena marked the coordinates, then placed a flag. "We found them," she said quietly. No one responded. They simply stood there, heads bowed, while the wind tore across the pass. That night, they radioed headquarters. Extraction and forensics would take 2 days. They stayed anyway. The ridge glowed faintly in the moonlight, and from their tents, they could see clouds moving in slow, gray sheets. Elena couldn't sleep. She replayed the notebook entries in her mind. Storm rolling fast. No flares left. We heard planes. Every line felt like a voice suspended in the cold, waiting 4 decades to be heard. By morning, snow had covered their tracks. The forensics helicopter arrived with 2 technicians and a preservation specialist. They used heated probes to melt away the ice in controlled increments. As layers peeled back, more objects appeared. A wristwatch stopped at 4:37. A compass cracked through the center. A rusted camp stove, still containing a folded matchbook from a Spokane gas station. All were tagged and logged. When Leah brushed away another inch of ice, she found the outline of a hand still clutching a strap. She didn't speak, just set down her brush. The mountain had not taken them violently. It had kept them exactly as they were in those last moments. Frozen mid-motion, trying to descend, too late for rescue. The technicians worked for hours in silence. At 3:15 p.m., they extracted 2 partial remains, male and female, later matched by personal effects to Mark and Beth. The others, Ty and Joe, were likely swept further downslope when the ice shelf collapsed. Even 40 years later, the park's frozen layers refused to reveal everything at once. When they finished cataloging, Elena walked to the edge of the ridge where wind carved through the valley like water. She imagined them here, young, laughing, unaware of what the sky was about to turn into. She whispered, though her voice was carried away before she could hear it herself. That evening, back at base camp, Leah carefully opened the Pentax camera in a portable dark tent. To everyone's astonishment, the film was still wound tight and only partially degraded. They stored it in temperature-controlled containers for transport, but Leah glanced at one negative against the light. There, faint and grainy, were 4 figures standing before a glacier, smiling. Beth held the red hat. Ty's hand was raised as if waving at the future. 2 weeks later, at the lab in Missoula, the photographs were processed. 10 images survived. The last frame showed heavy clouds rolling over the mountains, the group facing away, walking into mist. It was time-stamped August 6, 1981, 1 day before the storm report in the ranger logs. The discovery spread quietly at first, shared between departments. Then a local paper ran the headline, Drone solves 42-year glacier mystery. Families who had grown old waiting for closure gathered at the ranger headquarters. Mark's younger sister, now in her 60s, stood before the recovered pack. He always said the mountains were the only place he felt small in a good way, she said. Now they'll finally come home. The National Park Service arranged for DNA confirmation and planned to airlift the remains at dawn. That night, Elena sat alone by the campfire, watching sparks drift upward into the dark. She thought about how technology, machines made to measure ice retreat, had ended up fulfilling a different promise, giving voices back to the missing. The next morning, as the helicopter blades began to spin, snowflakes started falling, soft, almost warm. Leah glanced at Elena and said, "You realize we're standing on 40 years of silence, and now it's over." Elena nodded. Maybe, or maybe it's just begun, because somewhere below, two are still waiting. As the helicopter lifted, the valley receded into white, leaving only flags marking where tents once stood. From above, the pattern looked almost intentional, a rough circle around the ridge, like the shape of a compass pointing nowhere. And then, just as the drone had months before, the morning light broke across the ice, illuminating the site in brief golden clarity. For the first time in 42 years, the mountain reflected their story back to the sky. The following spring, the last of the snow melted earlier than usual. Streams carved new veins through the rock, and the place where the Hanley group had once camped was now half bare, a scar of gravel and glacial silt streaked with orange nylon threads. Rangers returned with recovery crews, hoping the thaw might loosen what the ice still held. Elena Price led them back up Cutbank Pass. In her pack was a sealed evidence tube containing the final undeveloped negatives from Ty Rutherford's camera. The lab in Missoula had processed 10 frames the year before, but 4 had remained opaque, frozen in chemical stalemate. Now, new restoration software promised to extract the faintest details. The Park Service wanted context. The families wanted truth. When they reached the site, flags from the previous mission still fluttered in the wind. Leah Mendez crouched by the crevasse where Mark and Beth had been found. Meltwater trickled down, revealing patches of faded fabric. "We've got movement in the lower ice shelf," she said. If Ty and Joe were pushed under, this is where they'd surface. They set up perimeter lines, slow and methodical. By noon, Leah's thermal probe caught an irregularity. 2 heat shadows, side by side, about a meter down. The team began to work in silence, chiseling ice layer by layer. At 2:40 p.m., the first sign appeared. A bootlace, threaded through bone, still knotted. Next to it, a ring with the initials JC. Elena stepped back. "Joe." The second shadow lay only inches away. When it emerged, Leah found a camera strap looped through a jacket. It was Ty's. He'd kept photographing until the end. The camera had cracked, but the film compartment was sealed by pressure and cold, perfectly preserved. They packed the finds in temperature-controlled cases and radioed base. The weather turned as if on cue, clouds piling over the ridge. It began to snow again. Not the violent storm of 1981, but soft, persistent flakes that coated the excavation site like an old instinct of protection. That night, back at camp, Elena couldn't sleep. She opened her field notebook and wrote, 42 years, 4 friends, found within 200 meters of each other. Distance between tents and final site, 1.1 kilometers. They almost made it. The next morning, the helicopter carried the final remains down the valley. For the first time since the Cold War, case number 81-47 was stamped closed. 3 months later, a community gathering filled the small town hall in Whitefish, Montana. Families, journalists, park staff, and hikers from across the decades attended. On the projector screen were the restored photographs from Ty's last roll. The images moved like a diary caught between two centuries. Frame 1. Beth and Joe laughing as they filtered water from a stream. Frame 2. Mark sketching something on a map, head tilted, sunlight on his face. Frame 3. A distant storm cloud climbing the horizon. Frame 4. The group standing together, half smiles, as if someone had just said something funny. Frame 5. Blurred streaks, maybe snow, maybe static. Frame 6. A faint orange glow through fog, the last image before the lens froze. When the final frame appeared, the room fell silent. Elena took the podium. "They didn't vanish into mystery," she said quietly. "They walked into weather, into a storm no one tracked, on a trail no one maintained, with courage none of us will ever fully understand. And the mountain kept them, not to hide them, but to return them when we were ready to listen." She paused, then played a short video captured from the drone footage that had started it all. The camera panned across the ridge, the tents, the recovered notebooks, and finally the 4 markers placed in a circle. Beneath each name, a single word: found. After the ceremony, the families hiked to the new memorial near Two Medicine Trailhead. The plaque read, "In memory of Mark Hanley, Beth Calloway, Ty Rutherford, and Joe Carver. Lost August 1981. Found 2023. The mountain remembers." The wind carried the sound of river water below, the same river that had once guided rescuers and now whispered through the trees. Months passed. The glacier continued to retreat, revealing more of the terrain every season. Forensic teams collected samples from the site, fragments of tent fabric, cookware, rope fibers. Scientists confirmed that a micro-avalanche, triggered by melting permafrost, had swept through the basin on the morning of August 7, 1981. It lasted only 40 seconds, but released enough snow and debris to bury the group's path. Their emergency radio, damaged by a fall, transmitted static for 9 minutes before dying. The report closed every lingering question, yet something about it resisted finality. Elena felt it each time she returned to the ridge. The sense that human stories never really end, they just merge into landscape. One evening, she revisited the site alone. The sun hung low, turning the ice field to gold. At her feet, wildflowers had begun to sprout through the gravel. Small yellow arnica, pushing between stones, once sealed by snow. She placed in the quiet, she imagined the voices of the 4 friends echoing faintly through time. Laughter, a map rustling, someone calling over the wind. The sound was so real, she almost turned. Before leaving, she took a final photograph, the view looking east, down toward the valley. Later, when she developed it, she noticed something strange. In the reflection of the melting ice, faint shapes appeared, 4 outlines walking along the ridge. Indistinct, but undeniably human. Maybe it was just the pattern of the meltwater. Maybe it was something else. She pinned the photo above her desk at Ranger headquarters, under the case number. No caption, just a date, August 7th, 1981, August 7th, 2023. By autumn, Glacier National Park updated its visitor maps. The old Cutbank Trail, closed for decades, was reopened as a heritage route, short, marked, and safe. At the entrance stood a new sign, the Hanley Loop, in honor of those who walked this path before us. Every year since, hikers pause at the memorial, reading the story etched in bronze. Some leave flowers, some leave small cameras, symbolic offerings to the mountain that kept its promise. And as drone footage continues to chart the glacier's slow retreat, new hikers often stop mid-viewing when the screen flashes a glint of orange beneath the ice. For a heartbeat, it looks like movement, a tent flap catching wind, or a figure shifting in the distance. Then it fades. But those who have been there say the mountain breathes differently now. Lighter, like it is finally exhaled after holding its secret for 42 years. And somewhere, deep in the layers of snow that remain, the laughter of four friends still echoes. A